C-Suite Edge podcast. I'm your host, John Light, and the founder and CEO of Sabretooth Recruiting, and part of my job is talking to smart and interesting people. I happen to catch one of those today, Ted Pizzo, a managing director from Lockton. Ted, thanks so much for joining me today.
I'm glad to join you, John. Thanks.
Well, so Ted, you and I have been talking now for a number of months. You know, for a while it was a number of weeks. I think we graduated to a number of months now, and I know we've been involved in doing some interesting work, some helpful work, I think, on some networking groups. I'm hoping that you can share a 90-second vignette, a picture into the life of Ted Pizzo and what you do today.
Sure. Thanks for having me again, John. So Ted Pizzo, I'm a managing executive with Lockton. How I got to this role is kind of a mystery to me. I actually was into exercise physiology in college, and my first job was with an insurance company helping to run their fitness center.
Okay.
Didn't want to get into insurance, thought it was pretty dull, but then after 2 years I did. Became an underwriter, got into sales management, and then migrated over to the brokerage side several years ago. So the main guiding principle I've had, John, is to collaborate. I really like people. I grew up in places where I worked at the Hartford YMCA, and I was always dealing with diverse group of people, whether their age, their race, their vocation, and I enjoyed that. I learned a lot from people. When I first started with Aetna as an underwriter, I remember a month in being confused because I'd speak to somebody in billing and speak to somebody in the field and speak to somebody in finance, and I was trying to remember everything. Then I started saying, hey, why don't we just have a call every week with all of us? So that collaborative spirit I learn a lot, and I brought that to what I do at Lockton and then what I do in terms of running our National Executive Advisory Group.
Well, I can attest for one thing, not seeing you in your work at Lockton, but seeing you around the NEAG, the advisory group. I mean, I tell people it's a labor of love, but at some point it also just becomes this habit of networking, connecting people, collaborating, as you said, and I think it's really admirable. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I don't think we have enough of that going on. You look around and you think about AI, and it's promulgating everywhere. And people are like, oh no, it's going to take over the world. Well, not today, probably not tomorrow either. But one thing is for certain, in my opinion, is the more we have AI, the more people use it, the more valuable these human-to-human connections become. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted you on, because you're in a business, like I am, that requires a lot of people contact. So let me ask you this, Ted, to kind of get folks focused on why what you do is important. And just the same way I try to get them focused on why what I do is important. What's the biggest, hairiest problem you solve for folks in the marketplace?
There may be a half dozen of those in large buckets. I think the common theme is people are trying to attract and retain talent. And that's an interesting process, because the people are operating on a finite budget in their companies, but they also want to have a culture that's going to keep folks engaged. So we're constantly interacting with executives. And in the insurance world, there's two main, buckets. One is we do employee benefits. So that involves creating compensation, total reward, benefit packages that do exactly that, attract and retain talent and labor. And then the other side is on the risk management and insurance side of the business. And that's more around executives, company owners deciding, are they going to use their capital or are they going to use institutional capital to protect their business and keep their business thriving? And that institutional capital involves either an insurance company or a reinsurance company. So the common theme is, hey Ted, we need to hire this talent, we need to retain this talent, but I don't have this infinite budget, so you can't tell me you just got to pay people more. Where do I find the money? So we've got to be creative, and we've got to really focus on them and understand their priorities and how they've approached things in the past, and what were the chain reactions of the decisions they've made in the past, and what metrics they want to see in the future that tells them they've been successful, whether it's a financial company growth metric, or it's a retention metric, or an employee engagement metric. So those are the general themes that we focus on.
I think that's actually a fascinating space right now, and I'll tell you why. If I tabbed over to another open tab of the 693 I have open on my laptop right now, there's an article I'm reading that a bunch of surveys of CPOs and CHROs, there's a shift in the market and a disconnect in a lot of companies where you'll have a CIO or a CISO, CTO, who doesn't think corporate talent acquisition, internal talent acquisition, is a worthwhile expenditure of funds. But if you flip over to the people leading that function, they think, yeah, 87%, this is where we need to be investing dollars, is attracting the right talent. But a key component of that, whether you're disconnected because you're always fussing about it, or you're actually leading it and you're trying to adjust and fill that gap, a big chunk of that gap is spelled out in how you treat people, the total package it's offered. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times we get down to brass tacks in a potential placement process, and we're talking numbers, and you get the question, well, tell me about the benefits. And of course, we always want to get at least a benefit summary from a client so we have it to share and you can see the costs and whatnot. But you have to stay competitive with what the market has. And if the market's offering pet insurance, for example, or a gym member benefit that's pre-tax, or more robust HSAs, or whatever it might be, you got to at least stay competitive. And I think you have a real problem when it comes not just to acquiring talent, but retaining it. If you're not in that top quartile of benefit packages in the marketplace amongst your peer group, I don't expect Acme Brick Company, mom and pop company, to have benefits that align with Apple, for example. But they need to be competitive against other companies in their geography and in their industry and that sort of thing. So I find it fascinating because it's part of the equation that really propels companies, because if you don't retain and develop your talent, you can't execute whatever your executive strategy is.
Well, you're spot on, because I had that conversation yesterday. Because we're always using benchmarking, to your point, because companies need to compare their benefits program, their budget, to others in similar industries and in similar job classifications. But the most important part of that is not just what you're spending, but are you providing a benefit or a benefit package that is valuable to those employees you're attracting. Just because the spend is X it's exorbitant doesn't mean that it's valuable to each individual employee. So I think the advantage today is, with all the analytic tools we have and with AI, you can drill down to what's important. If you've got 1,000 employees and there's 37 of them in one part of the country and 260 in another part of the country, and depending on that part of the country, what's their access to care and what are their individual set of circumstances. You hear about the standard determinants of health. So you can use that data to individualize, because what's important to Ted Pizzo might be different from what's important to, say, a 25-year-old. And I think it's exciting because it comes down to an individual level. What inspires me, John, you're part of our network, and everything we do in terms of helping people who are in job transition, and then everything you and I do for our businesses, it kind of revolves around, in my mind, being in the moment, and that's what I really value. So, if I'm talking to Mary Smith and she's a CFO of a tech company and they have 1,000 employees and they do 2 billion in annual revenue, certainly I'm going to have all the benchmarking information available to us to understand before I approach that conversation what her red flags are. But what makes our interaction most valuable to her and her company is when we're having that conversation, I don't let those preconceived notions of what a tech exec might want and what their personal priorities are and what their most pressing issues are today in any way hinder my ability to understand that person as an individual. I don't know if I'm articulating that well, but that's what I like about networking. It's fascinating to get to know people. And I think we lose some of that with all the social media influences because you have this. People are painting organizations and industries and regions of the countries with this broad brush and losing that individual connection. And if you find an individual connection, it's not about being idealistic. It's then you can add more value to a company. Then you can know why people come to work for them, why they stay, why they leave. So there's an art to business that I enjoy, and I know you enjoy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you hit on a theme. I'm not going to eat up a lot of time talking about how I learned this very difficult lesson early in married life. But giving a gift that you value to someone who doesn't value the gift the same way is not the same as giving them a gift in something they value, regardless of what you think of it. And to put yourself there, to give that other person something they're going to recognize the value of, and they're going to go, yes, this resonates with me. You got to get to know them a little bit. To your point, you got to engage with them, find out where they're at, find out what their priorities are, get in their head a little bit, out in their shoes a little bit about what makes them tick, because it's different. Even as a population, we can get segmented demographically and certain regions of the country and all this. I mean, you're up in the Northeast. I'm on that wavy line that kind of splits between the Deep South and the Southwest. And I sit back and look at it, and that there are going to be things we have in common because we're human, right? We want to give our kids a leg up in life. We want to succeed in our endeavors. We want to get out in the sun once in a while on the beach and not have to work while we get sand in the laptop or the phone. We want to do all these things, but there are other things that are pretty divergent. And we got to understand what people value, and that is such an individual thing, because it can vary from one person to the other. And it's kind of the other side of the coin when you prep someone to interview and you're sending them in and they're like, wow, I know the answers, that I know how to fix their problems. And you kind of get them to tap the brakes and say, no, tell them about problems you fix, sure, but let them tell you what their problems are. Get to know them a little bit. So now you can show them how you solve problems in the past and the present, and they can derive from that how you're going to help them solve their problems tomorrow. And I think that's a big part of what you're just talking about. And
I love that, John, because it's so much is about trust and general approaches that I think have worked for me is to, we all have an ego, right? And when I'm going into a discussion, whether it's talking to my neighbor or talking to an executive about their employee benefits program, I want to take the ego out of it, and I want to. It's not about impressing somebody; it's about listening to them and understanding them. And generally, I found that I've met a lot of people in my life based on my vocation, and I've lived in different parts of the country. I've lived in your backyard, as we've talked about it, and in 4 or 5 other places, and by a long shot, I think people are generally good. And you go on that assumption and you don't talk to them and try to impress them with how wonderful you are or how brilliant your kids are. You just try to get to know them. And,
Right.
and there's a real richness to life. I've gotten to know so many people in our network. We have thousands of people, as you know, and we have our calls and our WebEx sessions, and we have our one-offs. And I'm always so inspired by that. People will say, how do you have the energy to blah, blah, blah? I get so much back in terms of fuel, and it's like I'm chugging a gallon of positive energy, just consuming it. And I think that's kind of the zest of life, finding those things that boost your energy versus those things that deplete your energy. Because we got plenty of those. We all got bills. We all got craziness. We all got stresses. We come across people who maybe are stressed, so they can deplete your energy. So you seek out people like you, and I appreciate getting to know you, and others who, wow, hey, we're kind of shoulder to shoulder. We're in this together. We're trying to make things happen. John's a good guy. He means well. He wants to do his best by his clients, by his people, and there's an infinite kind of well of that positive energy out there if you have your eyes open, and I should say just have your heart open for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm a firm believer, kind of circling back to something we touched on earlier, that people do business with people. Companies want to believe people do business with brands, and I think there's some B2C stuff where that's true. People who buy Coke buy Coke. People who buy Pepsi stuff buy Pepsi stuff. It's just part of what's out there, and it seems like they don't intermingle a whole lot. But people ultimately come down to they do business with folks they like. And Ted, if someone wants to get to know you a little bit and they like your message, what's the best way for them to find you and get in contact?
Sure. A few ways to find me is, my email is tpizzo@lockton.com. That's TPIZZO@LOCKTON. It may be old school, but my phone number is 860-751-9805. When I say that, sometimes people smile. Even my kids say, Dad, I'm not going to leave you a message because it's not 100 years ago. I'm going to text you. But I know you and I run hard, and you got a lot of windshield time. Sometimes you're in the airport, and if people call me and leave me a message, I'm going to get back to them. And then obviously I'm on LinkedIn. And, I appreciate what you said, because going back to the differentiation, not to, beat on this, but I have to be candid. If on the surface I try to tell somebody without knowing them, without understanding what their priorities are and what they're trying to accomplish and who they are, what their personal motivations are, if I try to tell them what Lockton does, I'm going to sound very similar to my competitors, versus if I really listen and get a sense for them, what they are trying to accomplish personally, what is the passion of their business, what is the mission of their life, why do they do what they do, then I can more strategically offer ideas that are going to be designed, customized for them, rather than having them get what is the equivalent of a sales brochure from us or our competitors.
Being fast food insurance service, right? That's no one wants anymore, except maybe for auto, for the personal stuff. Hey, Ted, I want to say thanks for joining me, number one, and I also want to share. I know you're on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. We're connected. So if anyone's listening connected to me, it's easy to find Ted. If not, ping me and I'll get you in touch. But Ted, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your friendship and your collaboration.